So what we did is we found out that the land in the Manistee National Forest that we were on was Little River Band of Odawa Indians, which is based out of Manistee, Michigan, and we went up there a year in advance and we're like, we were thinking about doing an action camp, an environmental action camp here. This is your land. Like, what is the best way to enter this community and help you, and like also make our action camp about actually supporting the struggles on the ground that are happening right now. We don't want to just come into a community, talk about our own things, like say we're defending the environment and like supporting communities, but not actually do any of that. So instead of having our one Indigenous issues panel, our one POC panel of this action camp, we really focused on making it accessible and like focused specifically on those issues. And like that is kind of like the backdrop and the spine of the entire action camp. And what this action camp was mostly about was that community building and movement building and like getting used to like being in this space with people that are not only white and fighting the same fights as you. Like it was really great. Like we had so many Little River Band of Odawa Indian folk and Little Traverse Bay. These are all northern Michigan tribes in northwest Michigan. They were like, all right, y'all are coming in. Okay, then you need to come cut firewood for this elder. You need to like help with this service project and like do this. And we were like, yes, like we'll do everything. And they're fighting against Pipeline 5, which goes under the streets of Mackinac. And they just asked for our support in like specific like direct action, strategic planning, and like cleaning up after their powwows and doing all that grunt work, which is not sexy, but like you're supporting a community that's doing real fighting, and you have the privilege to come in and like choose what you want to fight for, but these people have to fight for this because it's their lives. So like you need to check your privilege and really just like check your comfortableness, your comfortability, and go in there and like do work for other people. And that's working in this movement has really helped me like understand what that means to support community struggle, because for someone who doesn't have that community, and for someone who's like wants to help but not be a parachute in and like get out, someone who wants to help and like do the things that maybe nobody else wants to do but like helps the struggle, you know? Okay, so I'm totally running out of time. Okay, that's one thing I do. Another thing I do, I'm just gonna say this really quickly. I'm part of a lot of, the University of Michigan has the Graham Sustainability Institute, which is like their like think tank for sustainability issues. And sustainability issues in this context means specifically just climate change stuff and like doing like reports on fracking or oil and stuff like that, and like no mention of environmental justice. In the past year or so, there's been kind of like this rise in larger environmental groups like 350.org, like Bill McKibben just adopted it into his vocabulary, what environmental justice is. So it's kind of like a buzzword flying around the university. So the university has been getting a lot of feedback from students that is like, okay, we want to have this more in our curriculum. So for the program in the environment and the Graham Sustainability Institute like made this call out to say like, okay, like environmental justice is this thing that everyone's talking about now, like we should maybe talk about it. And they were looking for facilitators for discussion, and I was like, oh yes, this is perfect. It's like they don't even know what they're asking for right now. So now I teach biweekly discussions at the Trotter Multicultural Center about environmental justice, and it's the first thing I've like led that's not necessarily organizing, but kind of just like consciousness raising and like discussing something that's not in normal everyday conversation or in the larger discourse of environmental issues. So just like talking about like the very specifics of like what environmental justice is, like examples that are not just Flint in Detroit, like those are things people know about, but even in Ypsilanti and like things all around us, and how it's connected to the environmental issues, but how it's also connected with everything that we do. Like everything that you buy is basically an environmental injustice in another country. You know, we're talking about polluting the river, but also like what about labor conditions in those factories that you're buying all your things from, you know? So this has been a really great place to have the dialogue on intersecting parts of what environmental justice is with students, which is a focus like I shied away from students for a long time, just so disillusioned with the people around me, but it's been really nice to come back now as like a senior and like working with a bunch of freshmen that just like showed up to these meetings and are like, we're here to talk about climate change. And I'm like, well, let me tell you about environmental justice. And just like trying to just bring that into the discourse and make that a topic that people know beyond just like the basic definition, and show how it's part of like everyday life and how it's tangible and how you can work to support communities without having like a white savior complex and things like that. So I do those educational things. And finally, just one other thing that I've worked on, just like touching on these other things I was talking about, supporting communities. I worked at this nonprofit as a freshman. It was called the Southeastern Michigan Regional Energy Office. It was based out of Ferndale. And basically we went to inner ring suburbs of Detroit and also in Detroit, and talked to city governments about how to like make them more sustainable. And then you realize so quickly the differences between the suburbs, like economically, and then how LED light bulb in Highland Park is so much more important than an LED light bulb in Royal Oak, Michigan. Because Highland Park, when they were going through emergency management, DTE came in and took out all of the streetlights, all of them. Like that little neighborhood city doesn't have any streetlights. They took the poles out with them. It's just like, you see these little bases of like streetlights left in that city. So anyways, infrastructure in communities that are historically oppressed, that's where I'm focusing right now, also in my own work. Like, spent the last 2 years in Southern California, a couple weeks out of each year. I still go to school here, sorry. In Southern California, they have this state program that basically funds nonprofit solar companies, or nonprofit solar, not companies, just organizations, to provide free solar panels to tribal people because they qualify for a low income bracket. So we stayed on reservations and just installed solar panels for free, basically, and get paid for it by the state government. And I was like, okay, this is something the government can do that's actually good, that's awesome. And just like doing work like that, I feel like I've been trying to just do like more infrastructure projects, because those communities are the ones that like need support to become autonomous and not have to depend on the jobs that coal companies bring in, the jobs that industrial capitalism brings. And also just the final thing, like I just spent the last 5 days in North Dakota, and if y'all are familiar with the Dakota Access Pipeline occupation camp, and that, yeah, we can talk about this after if you want to come up to me, because this is about to be over, but that was a really interesting example of everything I'm talking about. But cool thing about that is that it's brought a lot of attention to the issue of energy infrastructure on reservations specifically, and a lot of resources have been pouring into that community because there's so much attention on it. People are just coming in saying like, all right, like we have money for wind turbines and solar panels, like you have a lot of sun here, like we want to build you community centers and libraries and stuff like that. So so environmental justice issues, a way that I've found that is like a really helpful response to that is focusing on supporting those communities. If you're not from that community, that is. Like supporting those communities to help support themselves eventually, and then you can just like peace out after you just like help a little bit that you can provide, you know, and then, God, sorry. I'm just looking at the time, I think I should just end. Please like me up.